Hello friends. I know I've gotten to have conversations with and know very many of you. Some of you I haven't really gotten to meet yet, and I hope to. I'm Brother Brian, a vowed member with the Order of the Common Life. And Jared asked me sometime last year to take a little bit of time and think about a month where I might want to share in one of these videos on one of our monthly commitments. And two came to mind, and I want to share a little bit about that, but with purpose. The first that leapt to mind was January, the focus on simplicity. And that's because simplicity, in some sense, is something that comes fairly naturally to me among the commitments, really draws me to the commitments in our rule of life. Because for most of my adult life, I preferred to sleep on a mat on the floor. I eat the same lentils and vegetables almost every day. I'm genuinely happy, to a point, to have as few things as possible. But the second that came to me was, of course, this month, on the consecration of love. This, in many ways, does not come naturally to me. In fact, a lot of my life over the years has been constructed to protect me against being vulnerable to relationships with others. And I think often of a section from the book, The Sacred Enneagram, which really revealed to me, or perhaps exposed me, to the basic truth that the reason I might tend to withhold myself from other people is because of a basic fear that I'll discover I actually need love. Because that would be a terrible thing, wouldn't it? To realize you actually need something that you don't believe that you have within yourself. Something you don't believe you can have within yourself. And here's the reason I share that. Because last April, at age 34, I got married. After years of discerning a vocation to celibacy, really wrestling with discernment with my spiritual director, with my discerning community, and at times coming to a fair amount of peace and hope and consolation about that vocation. But something nagged at me personally. All along the way, there was this sneaking suspicion that the way I lived my life as a single man alone, however materially simple and spiritually focused and monk life my bachelor life would be, personally, I was at risk of spending my life never being formed in some particular deep ways I was too good at escaping. That however much I might hold to a rule of life and however tightly I put constraints in and around my life, there were these what I call hard to reach places that would evade me, or that I would evade. In a word, or in a picture, whenever these things were pressed on in me and started to get uncomfortable, I could always just leave the room. I could always draw inward. I could always pull back from a friendship that felt vulnerable or challenged me, or shift how I show up in a relationship, or not show up at all. And I could always find something. I was free to find something, always, to throw myself into other than the relational or the interior work that threatened to confront me. Into ministry, or into work, or into study, or into my head. And I remember distinctly, while my wife Anna and I were dating, one evening we sat on the couch for what felt like and could have been an hour, slowly talking through over and over a misattunement where hurt was taken on for her and that needed attention and repair from me. During which there were all these parts of me that were being stirred up underneath the surface I hated seeing. There's a defensive part of me, an accusing part of me that wanted to jump on the offensive, a rational part of me that just wanted to detach coolly, a vulnerable part of me that felt like a disappointment of who she expected me to be, and a critical part of me that was disappointed in all of this happening in myself. And there was something in me early on in this that almost felt like it tugged on my sleeve inside and said, yeah, this is our exit. I don't want to deal with this. And yet, to my surprise, there was nothing in me that turned toward the door. And I realized that I had decided already that nothing was going to pull me away out of that room. There was something that was too important happening in that circular conversations with all of its long, excruciating pauses. Committing to be present to her, but also to everything that was happening in me right then. That felt like if I left the room, even if I came back, it would never happen. Our commitment in our rule of life to the consecration of love and celibacy in marriage, understand, isn't just a spiritual way of saying we either remain faithful in marriage or we remain faithful in celibacy. It's not merely a statement on sexual ethics. These are two important states of life, to be sure, but this is because they're containers for something to happen in our formation, in the formation of our love. They're schools of love, where we learn to love as God loves. First, by realizing more deeply than we'd like all the ways that we don't and can't and need to be healed for. As Jared says, and hearing this has been one of the single greatest gifts to my marriage, both marriage and celibacy are forms of asceticism, which, as Jared has talked about, is training. And so here's what our rule of life says as an introduction to our section on the consecration of love. The consecration of love is a commitment to choose to embrace constraint for the purpose of refining, intensifying, and directing our love for God within a vocation of either celibacy while single or marriage. And I have become personally convinced that formation in the love of God can scarcely happen outside of a real commitment, whether to a singular person or to a community of people to whom we're committed. Not to leave the room, but to be present to the hard and ascetical work of love. That I think is why the vow of stability, the vow not to leave, not to walk away, even for another good thing, is so vital for the Benedictine and the Cistercian life. And our hope is that the order would become a place where spiritual friendships and shared vocations and physical community offers this school of love in a robust way for celibate vocations, where deep and fulfilling commitments can be made to one another. Because this is where formation happens, where the pressing of God and of others upon our lives to the point where we want to pull back, to where we're confronted with our own inabilities to love others as God loves, that turns the soil over in our hearts, and we actually remain present in the place of those relationships, where our own love is small and poor and still developing, and we allow love to do the work in us that we cannot do in isolation, independently. So the invitation in this commitment is to be formed in the school of love, within the state of life that's ours today, and to take that school of love seriously. For married persons, that's most of all your spouse. And the ways they hold up a mirror to you, the ways they create endless opportunities for you to embrace and take refuge in humility. As Benedict would say, to choose love of them or be loved by them over loving yourself, such as we do. If you're unmarried, who are or who could be the people you're committed to? Beyond remaining in the constraints of your celibate life, whose presence, whose otherness, whose challenge to the ways that you love provides constraints that can shape you in the school of love? Not just the asceticism of restraint, but the asceticism of loving and choosing to remain in the asceticism of loving. See, I believe this is the challenge for both states of life. This is why they're both asceticisms, training us to love as God loves, that we might even love God eventually with God's own love. Friends, as Jared always says, there is so much here. And as he always says, we do have some questions below for you to engage in with this month and to take into reflective conversation with your formation groups, which we're so eager for you to do and to get to hear bits about as we next come together. So until soon, friends, be loved.